Hello, and welcome to Coach Talk, the show more interested in ideas and philosophy than fact and history. My guest this week is Lars Robl. He's the Director of Performance at Falcons Esports and a 4-time major winner, both at Astralis and Vitality. We talked about the value of hot or cold reviews, the role of a sports psychologist, and we broke down his performance model in great detail. Lars is one of, if not the, most successful performance coach working in esports, but he also brings a wealth of experience from other areas. He's worked with top athletes in many different sports and was an officer in the Danish Special Forces for over 2 decades. He's an incredibly fascinating person to listen to. The fact that there are people like Lars in esports is good news for our collective futures. This episode is once again brought to you by Quickfire.gg. So for those that don't know, Quickfire is a coaching platform that, alongside payments, scheduling, and practical things, makes tools for coaches. You can set up live VOD reviews, anchor your messages to specific timestamps in videos for future use, and even set up the auto-tracking of goals with the Riot API. While I was working, even in the LEC, I was just using a pen and paper, so I understand that learning a new set of tools can be daunting. But with coaching as competitive as it's becoming, anything we can do to set ourselves apart is a fantastic opportunity. And now is as good a time as any to add something new to what you offer and make it as clear as possible for your players. So if you're interested in checking out coachify.gg, you can do so with the link below. They have a bunch of free options, which I suggest you check out first and familiarize yourself with, although there are extra tools more catered to teams behind a paywall. If you do decide to look into Coachify, please drop me a message on Twitter or on Discord and let me know your feedback, as we're working together to try and create the best possible tools for coaches. Lastly, if you enjoy this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're interested in exploring mentoring or any of the other things that I do to support coaches in the scene, follow me on Twitter, where you can find all the other links that you'll need. And now, without further ado, Lars, what is coaching?
Well, John, coaching for me is I think it's to help individuals and also organizations to release their full potential. And I'm working very much towards a dream. So it's helping them to release the potential to achieve the dream or the goal or the ambition that the organization or the individual has. So that's for me the main part.
So do you see, in your role as the Director of Performance, you see that as a kind of coaching the organization as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is, yeah. I mean, the role I have now as Director of Performance, I have a huge span of control. There's a lot of different games and a lot of different cultures and cultures on different levels. So it's very much about coaching the teams, the organization into understanding what is performance, what is performance at a high level. And I think one of the things, because in esports it's developing so quickly, it's so fast, and I think it's in order to understand performance, as is quite normal in traditional sports. One of the things that comes first and is a precondition in order to talk performance is to make the athletes, because the gamers, I call them athletes, the athletes to see themselves as athletes, to perceive themselves as athletes. And as soon as they start perceiving themselves as athletes, then they automatically start to getting the interest of, okay, the wider performance. Where can I gain half a percentage here, half a percentage there in my performance? And that automatically leads to the interest about the performance enhancement outside the server.
And have you found that to be something that people get on board with quite quickly, started to see themselves as athletes, or is it a struggle?
And I won't say it's a struggle, but it is challenging. But again, it depends on. That's at least my experience. Depends on what type of game it is. I think, and perhaps because I'm been working mostly with Counter-Strike or CS, I see that they are. There's a culture in CS where they are a little bit ahead of some of the other games in that sense, in understanding themselves and see themselves as athletes. And now I've been working with traditional sports at the very highest level, at the Olympic level, and so on. And when I compare esport, no matter the game, at this level, when we're talking the highest level, it's absolutely as demanding for the team, for the individual, as traditional sports in that level. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult for people outside esports to understand that, because they are not sweating to the same degree as marathon runners or badminton players or whatever it is. But the demands that are put on the athletes in order to make decisions over that longer period so fast is, I mean, it requires the highest level of performance.
So I'd love to get into the structure you have and stuff, but we'll save that for a little bit in further down the line, because you gave an answer once that I really love. You asked, what do you do as a sports psychologist, and you're talking about the structure, but also being present in the here and now when we're playing, like that's your goal. So why is that so important, to just be actually where we are in the game right now?
In the here now, I mean, because if you're going to have your full focus, and especially required in esports, where you can't afford to make mistakes. In CS, you got one round, okay, then you got the next round to perhaps to cover up for that. But I mean, if you have your mind somewhere else in last game or in the future, on the results that are coming up or whatever it is, then you can't have your whole focus, in your entire focus on the here and now, and being in the here and now means that, I mean, you're totally focused on the decisions you're making right now. And as I said, especially in esports, it's so critical, because there are so many decisions made so rapidly or so fast over so long a period of time. I mean, one game or two games or whatever, or one match, two matches, whatever the game is. So it is critical, but that goes for all sports. I mean, if you can be in the here now, you got the full potential released in that moment. What you bring to the table. And normally we talk very much about being 100%, or I mean, everybody wants to be to bring 100% in what they are doing, no matter the sport. But I mean, you're never 100%, because perhaps you have a bad night's sleep, you have calls with a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is. So, but having that mindset that you can always bring 100% of what you got into the here and now, and then you can't do anymore.
And this might stretch, well, definitely stretches beyond esports, but might stretch beyond sports psychology. Why is it so difficult for people? I mean, I notice it myself all the time. Even having these conversations, it's really difficult for me to just genuinely stay in the moment and not be thinking about what I'm going to ask next, or even how the settings are and all the things that are recording, rather than just actually listening to the person. And that's when there's so much less pressure than when you're performing on a stage. So why is this so difficult for us?
I mean, that's because we as humans have what we call a monkey mind. It's jumping all the time. It's jumping from the past to the present to the future, to the past to the future to the present. That's quite normal. And I mean, what it requires from the athlete or whoever it is to be in the here and now is to just don't follow the thought or the mind when it drifts to the past or to the future. But I mean, and that's a technique, just to be aware that, okay, now we're drifting, and then let go and get back to the here and now. And sometimes it's more difficult than other times. Perhaps if you had a bad match prior to this one you're sitting in right now, your mind can automatically be caught in the bad decisions you made, the result that came out of the match, or it could also be caught in speculation. If I don't win this match or this map, then the result will probably be, and then you have your mind in the future on something that hasn't happened yet. So I mean, it's quite natural, but the thing, and as I said, it's purely technique, is to be able to release and first of all to register when the mind is drifting, and then releasing from that and get back into the here and now. And so that's your technique, as I said.
And then it's just practicing that technique over and over.
Okay. That's also something that I think that also goes for traditional sports, that people has to understand that when you talk about mental training or training the mental side, that it's training exactly as you are practicing any other things. You're practicing this map or this smoke or whatever it is. It has to be practiced, because if you don't practice also the mental side, then you can't use it in competition when it's required. So it's not a bag of magic dust that you just pull up when it's needed. It has to be practiced, and that's hard work.
Yeah, but I think even with myself, for sure, even though I'm, I guess, maybe academically aware that it's practice, I still somehow struggle with that more than the idea of going to the gym, lifting a barbell and suddenly being strong. Like, I know that's going to take time, I know that's going to take repetitions, but I'm still searching for that bit of magic dust when it comes to the mental side of things. I don't know if that's something you see in everyone, or is that...
I think it's not only for you. I think that's a quite common thing that you're touching on here, and that comes down to people not really, because it's a new thing, the mental training, the sports psychology, bringing that into the development of the athlete or the team is quite new. So and then again, it's we really don't know how we should do it. It's more easy just going down and doing 3 sets of 12 reps. I mean, that's written down. We know that's we've done that for a long time. But this, we're working with the mind, where there's no exact answer on how to do it. That's a little more difficult. And also, it takes time before you see the effect. I mean, it's so popular bringing mindfulness into sports, esports, or traditional sports, but it's a little bit difficult. It's a little bit fluffy. So I can't really see the effect. I also think it's difficult. Then it's not so important. That's when the training and the focus come in. So you have to. It's a technique. You just have to practice, and then the result will show.
And how does this factor in when we're thinking about the potential benefits of visualization and kind of looking into the future and planning for the future and that kind of thing? Is it just, the ability to actually be able to do both and sort of the right time and the right place? Or is it something where you think being present in the here and now is almost always the better thing to do?
I think if I understand correctly, I mean, it's 2 different things. It's being in the here now is so important when you are in the competition or in the practice. I mean, that's also because if you can be in the here now in the practice, you'll get the full effect of what you are trying to achieve, the practice. So, but for the future, and that's now we're touching on the performance model. It's so important to have a plan reaching into the future in what you want to achieve, and because a plan gives a direction, it gives clarity. It's also a precondition for creating synergy between the different things you are putting into your practice. The mental side, the physical side, the technical, the tactical side. But quite as important when we're talking the mental thing is that a plan is structure, and structure decreases anxiety. So whenever you get uncertain, insecure, and you will, because doubt is that's just a fundamental in sport, in competition, because there's something what you want to achieve. It could be a goal, it could be a result, but it's out there in the future. So and there's a possibility that you'll succeed, but there's also a danger that you'll fail. So doubt is ever present. And it's not really the doubt that is a problem, but it's the difficult feelings connected to the doubt. As I said, insecurity, uncertainty, anxiety sometimes, frustration. That's really the problem. And those feelings are the things that can destroy your plan or your ambition. Because sometimes you deviate from what you want just to get away from the difficult feelings. Then it's not so important anymore. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll find another way. But if you have that plan and you know how to work, and that's also the psychology in it, if you know how to stand firm when you meet resistance, when the doubt takes over, I mean, then it's something. But the precondition for that is that you have a plan, and a plan in itself is structure, and that decreases anxiety.
Mm. So yeah, I'd love to get onto the performance model. That's going to be the big topic. So you say it starts with the dream. So even there, you were mentioning a plan. Is a dream different from a plan, and if so, how?
No. The dream is the, you could call it the end state or the effect that you want to achieve. It's something. I mean, in the world of sports, I think we get something for free that you don't really have to the same degree when you're working in other organizations, business-wise or whatever. We got this dream. I mean, in business, we talk about a vision. We have a vision, but with the dream, I mean, I have a dream of achieving this. I have a dream of going to the Olympics. I have a dream of winning the major or the TI or whatever it is. I mean, with the dream comes feelings and emotions to a bigger degree than you see when you're talking about a vision or an ambition or a goal. So there's something that we get for free when we are in the world of sports, no matter traditional or esports. But in fact, that's the end state. That's what we want to achieve, and that's somewhere out in the future. And in order to get out there, we need to do something, and that's where the plan up.
And is it important for when you're doing this with teams and with players and coaches, for them to emotionally connect with the dream as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is, yeah. Because I remember the first time I worked with Astralis, and we had this boot camp without PC that is a very critical or essential part of my philosophy, my way of working. The first time I had, that's why we talk about that. That's why we create the plan. That's why we introduce or adjust the performance model. And the first time I had this session with Astralis, we talked about, of course, we defined the dream. And when I asked them about the dream, what is the dream? And the first answer was, we want to win a major. Right? And then my question is, okay, there's a lot of other teams that want to win a major, and you have already won a major. They won a major in 2017, and I came on board in 2018. And you've already won a major. Why is it important for you to win a major? Why is it important for you to win another major? And then they got a little bit silent, eh? And that's the same way. If I take an example for traditional sports, I work with the Olympic athletes or the national team in canoe and kayaking that were going to the Olympics. And when I asked the athletes the same question, what was your dream? Yeah, I want to go to the Olympics. Yes, okay, but why? Why is it important? And then they got a little bit silent again. They haven't really thought about that. And my point here is that if we can get down and get a grip of the feelings and the emotions connected to the dream, then you got the fuel. Then you got the important. Then you got a grip on the important stuff, because it's the feelings, it's the emotions connected to the dream that will keep you going when you meet resistance. When it's not going as planned, then, I mean, it's easy if you are not connected to the dream to a deeper degree than just, I want to do that, I want to do that. No, why is this important? Because getting connected, that is, as I said, what keep you going when you meet resistance. That should drag you through difficult times.
And what do you do in practice when you're in those situations? So they say
just,
they want to go to the Olympics. You ask why. There's silence.
Yeah.
Then what?
And then we start. Okay, why? And then of course we have a discussion about that. But my weight is just keep asking, and of course helping the athlete or the team to progress in that question. I mean, assisting, getting a different angles to the question, but making them go further down. It could be about recognition. I would like to be recognized for the hard work. So standing on the podium at the Olympics, I mean, that would make me proud, or I will get the recognition for all the suffering I've had. So that could be one thing. And I remember my favorite story is one of the athletes that I had. When we came down to what it really was about, it started with, I want to go to the Olympics. But where we ended was that I want to make my father proud. That was a real motivation behind going that. But it took some, and then I get goosebumps because it was there. You could really feel the athlete and the desire and the ambition and the motivation in order to do whatever we're doing. And I think with Astralis, without, because I've written about that in my book, when we started doing that and with the dream, as I said, the first answer to the dream to my question was, we want to win a major. Yeah, I understand that, but why? And where we ended up in defining the first dream was that, okay, we wanna create an era. We wanna create an era so that fans, influencers, ourselves, whoever, talk about an era when we are done. That was something completely different. And then we got connected to the feelings of why it's important for you to create that era. But you see, it's quite different from just saying we want to win a major. Winning a major was just a step on the way to create an era. So it was necessary to win a major and another major and another major to create that era. But again, they achieved the dream, and then we had to define a new dream. And it's so important to, whenever you are getting close to the dream, that you then define the next dream in order to have the fuel that keeps you going over years.
It reminds me of there's a period in the All Blacks history, the New Zealand rugby team, where they had originally they didn't call it their dream, but their goal was to be the best rugby team in the world. Then they achieved that. Then it's the best rugby team ever. Then it was the best sports team ever. And they're starting to talk in interviews about hockey teams from the 1950s or something, because that's what they had as their constant thing to be striving forward.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned about the All Blacks. I'm a huge fan of the All Blacks or the rugby world. I get a lot of inspiration from the rugby world. I never played rugby. I don't know rugby, but the culture that the All Blacks created, and also the culture that the Springboks created. I mean, it's so inspiring. That's funny.
So, in your experience, have you always ended up with something that does connect with the emotions, or has there ever been a time where be it in esports or sport, where someone just really doesn't know why they want to do that thing, and it doesn't ever get to something, or once you get there, everyone does have something that they're connecting with?
I think that I've never experienced that people that couldn't get to the point where people connected to the dream with the feelings why it is important to me. Of course, there is a challenge because a team consists of individuals, and it is important that when we define the dream of the team, that everybody buys into the dream. It should be meaningful. They should be able to see themselves in the dream, because if they don't do that, I mean, again, we won't get the full effect out of it, and the synergy of the team. But it's also very important to understand and acknowledge that there can be different motivations behind the dream, individual motivations. So it's also important to get that individual motivation clear to the individual in order. So that's also a step on the way. But they should. I mean, if they don't buy in to the joint dream or the joint defined dream, then we have a problem. And that's why it sometimes takes time. When I have the boot camps without PCs, it lasts 3 days. We're not only working with the dream, but breaking it down, and there's also a lot of other things we do. But it is so important, and sometimes you have to revisit the dream, because if something happens, and you have to adjust it, because a dream has to be, as I said, it has to be meaningful to everybody in the team. That's one precondition. The second one is it should be on the edge. Whenever you think about the dream, whenever you work, there should be, as we call Danish, butterflies in the stomach. I don't know what you call it in English, but it should be. But the third thing, and that's quite as important, it must and shall be realistic. If it's not realistic, if it gets during the work towards the dream, gets unrealistic or not realistic anymore, then you have to redefine it, because it's got to be there. It's got to be realistic, because on an unconscious level, we know if it's realistic or not realistic, and it's got to be realistic in order to have the effect.
How do you find that balance? I mean, especially if because now you're covering loads of different games, especially if you're going into a game that you're maybe not as familiar with, where it is on the edge, but it's not too ambitious. Because also the other thing that comes to mind is we hear stories, and of course it's a bit of a filtering, right? We only hear the stories where they had a crazy dream and did achieve it. We didn't hear the hundreds of stories where they had a crazy dream and didn't achieve it. But we hear stories. One for me would be Team Sky coming into the Tour de France. British riders never won, and they say we're going to win within 5 years. And of course, probably rightly so, completely laughed at and mocked and stuff, but it does end up happening in 3, not even 5. So how do you try and find that balance of ambitious enough but not completely
too
crazy?
Ambitious, not too, yeah. Of course, when if I know the setting, if I know the sport, it's the context. Of course, it's easier for me, but otherwise it's very much about listening to people, listening to the people around, also the coaches that normally are more experienced than the players. So the cooperation with the coach when we are defining the dream is absolutely important. But this about being realistic and on the edge, I mean, sometimes I have to push the other way. Because I remember, and that's my favorite story from Vitality, when we 4 months before the major, we had this boot camp without PCs. Of course, we had the dream, because I worked with them for 1.5 years before that. But when we were getting closer, and I remember we were sitting in January 23, defining the dream or redefining the dream towards the major. And of course, it was to win the dream, and it's been all the way. It was to win the major, the last major, and in Paris with the French team. But I remember when we were sitting talking about the dream 4 months out in the future. It was the first definition was from the team. It was, yeah, our dream is to reach the quarterfinals, and then we can see what happens. If we reach the quarterfinals, we're in there, and it's probably good enough. And I really had to push, and when we got that discussion started, no, boys, it's not. That's not what you want. That's a cover up. That's something just to avoid the anxiety and insecurity related to this. No, I mean, we are here to win. You have said that earlier. We're here to win. So what we ended up with was, okay, we had to win the major. Of course we had to win the major. No less. It's about winning. And then we had a lengthy discussion because of course there was the possibility that we didn't exceed in our dream. But then we started making the plan and see, okay, how can we then, what is that we have to do in order to have the best chances to win our dream? And then we reframed some of the steps that we had. And one of the things that got quite important was that, okay, I mean, we can't, we won't let the situation take control over us. Let us take control of the situation. So going in with a totally different approach, because there was a lot of insecurity, a lot of pressure. Of course, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations to Vitality. So it's sometimes I have to push the other direction too.
How do you
find the right level? I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, making sure. I love this idea of having it where it's, you almost want it to always be like just out of reach, not far enough away that it's silly, but not achievable when we could just do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So after this, after you've got the dream, you talk about these several different tracks. So what I'd kind of like to do is just go through them one by one and get your perspective on them and also what you kind of want to achieve with them. So if we start with the mental track, what's your kind of desired outcome from the mental track? If you are with a team for a year or 2 years, you look back and think, we did that part well. Like, what is it that we're getting out of it? Is it just coming back to that being present thing, or is there more to it as well?
And there's more. There's a lot more to it. There's some very specific tools about handling tension and being present and all that. That's minor techniques in my way, but it is also very much about understanding. That's also in the mental, understanding the group dynamics, the team dynamics that are in the team. I mean, group dynamics or team dynamics is sometimes it's very beneficial. I mean, we all know it. Sometimes when people get together, wow, something extra happens. And sometimes the group dynamics makes it very difficult for a group and can destroy a team if it's not handled correctly. So it is about giving the team the understanding and the tools to work with that, so that we decrease the chances of the group dynamics destroying the team, and also increase the possibilities for the group dynamics to enhance what we're trying to achieve. And that comes down to tools. It comes down to the team culture that we're creating, but also understanding of what happens when people get together. And one of the things that I'm normally addressing is that even though they have the same dream, they have a shared dream, even though they are best comrades or colleagues or whatever most of the time, even though they are in the same team with different roles, but towards the same objective, then they're also rivals. They're also competitors, competing against each other. So in any organization, not only in esports, in any organization, sport or whatever organization where people are together, they're also feelings like envy, jealousy, and all that. And if they are not addressed, if you don't have a culture where you, and first of all, an understanding about that is normal in any organization, but you don't have the understanding and the tools to address it, then it gets difficult, and then it stops removing focus from the here and now. And so creating that is absolutely essential. Is essential. One of the things in the mental track is also about creating the team culture based on values. We have a certain way of working with that, but it based on values. But I think all organizations and all corporations are based on values, and it's so popular. We need to be honest. We need to respect each other. Yeah, that's good, but I mean, I understand that. But what is it? I mean, what's respect to us? What's honesty to us? What's decency for us? And we got to talk into a joint understanding of what is the behavior connected to respect. What is the behavior connected to honesty, or whatever it is? Because you come with a lot of experience with honesty from your background, from your life. I come with another one. So we got to negotiate the joint of understanding of, okay, when we're talking about honesty, what is that to us? So that's also a huge part of working with that.
I think it's so important. I mean, especially as in esports, we've so often in Europe as well, we've got people coming from all over. Like, what's honesty to me is going to be completely different from someone who has a different background, different experiences.
Exactly. So this, if one, and I think a lot of organizations miss a huge opportunity by not digging the step deeper in that, because okay, yeah, we're going to be honest, and then we got that value, but it's like a rubber band, you can shape in what length that you want, So we got to be precise in what we mean with that in order to get the full effect. Then you get the effect of it. But again, that takes time, and that's why we had this 3 days bootcamp without a PC. So it's time.
Yeah, I think it's so important that there's people like you and doing that, taking that time. Because coming from, when I was coaching myself, oftentimes, I was actually using people like yourself to try and almost argue with the organization that it is worth taking the time to take a step back, because we're so focused on these short term, the idea of skipping, the thing that I would always get is we can't skip these days of practice. And I just think, in 6 months, I don't notice an extra 5 scrim games or an extra 5 hours of practice, but I will notice really actually understanding how we want to behave.
Yeah, it's exactly that's exactly what it's about, And I remember the first time with with Astralis, and I think we had 14 days until to the first competition, And I remember Sonic, Danny, that he was just no, we can't do that. And also the players, I mean, coming out here spending 3 days without computers, I mean, it was scary, and also seen as a waste of time. But then it's about standing firm, and say, okay, that's a precondition. And now, I mean, Australia couldn't live without it, and vitality. It's just got to. Wow, that's so important. That's where we align. That's where we develop. That's where we set the scene for the future. But it is now when I'm with Falcons, I mean with the CS team, it's normal. They understand, but some of the other teams, it's the players and even the coaches. Wow, it's so scary. We can't. And that's quite normal because they don't know what it is. So it's about they got to experience before they see the value of it.
So, in terms of kind of getting the most value out of it, you've already mentioned digging really deep into these things, actually defining what they really mean. But something that I've noticed quite a lot, not only with myself from years ago, but with the coaches that I work with at the moment, we quite often, at the beginning, when we all come together, we get these values, we're all excited about them, we're all inspired by them because we've had these conversations, maybe versions of this conversation around the dream, but gradually, they gradually slip away. So what do you do to keep them there and keep them in focus? Because the tendency we have with a lot of cultural things is we kind of go a millimeter past the line, and then if nothing happens, we go another millimeter, and you look back in 3 months and we're not doing any of the things we said. So how do you keep them in focus?
I think it's about, for me, it's about keeping that, the dream and the process and the plan present to the team. So whenever I'm going, when I'm going with a team, could be see as another team, and we have done this work, then it's there in the prac room. It's on Malta, it's in Paris, it's wherever. We bring it, and whenever we have our meetings, our team talks, I mean, it's present, and we refer to the dream or the DNA or the values whenever it's appropriate. So it is present, and then we have this at least twice a year where we evaluate or adjust the dream and the values and all that, because we have this boot camp without PC every 6 months to keep momentum, and it's also it's got to be, it's got to make sense to the boys, to the team, or whoever is in play. So
how do you evaluate when to change these values, and when is it, I don't know, either the way we're actually doing them and the value is good, but the behaviors are not, or how do you decide what to change and what not to?
I mean, we do that. I have a very essential tool, you can call it a tool, that I call empty the backpack. And that's just part of the team culture. And that is connected to what I talked about, the group dynamics. What is really in play in the team. It's not about the tactics. It's not about the techniques. It's about the relations. What is going on? What is happening in the team? What is difficult? And that's where we evaluate. That's where we get when the culture is starting to show that we have people expressing doubts about one thing or the other. It could also be about the plan and the process related to the model, and then we take it up. So this empty the backpack is, I mean, it is something that I can call, the coach can call it, or the individual players can call it. But we also have a system that every time before we go into a competition, we have an emptied backpack. And when I'm away with the team, we also have an empty the backpack, or 2 or 3, whenever it's necessary during the competition. And then at the end of the competition, we have what I call a hot wash up. That's where we debrief the entire competition or the process where we are right now. And also, okay, lessons learned, lessons identified. Is there something that we need to change related to the dream or the near future, and the next things that we're dealing with? So we are constantly, just to answer the question, we're constantly evaluating the things, also the culture. Right now, it is a challenge, and that's because we have in Falcons in CS we have an INS core and we have an Astralis Vitality core. So that's 2 cultures clashing. And now, when we are struggling a bit, the differences show way. So it's about aligning. So we have a lot of talks, a lot of empty the backpacks in a good way, and that's necessary. But again, that comes down to that the boys understand, or the team understands the value of it, and how it is, and they do. I mean, yeah.
So how do you run one of these empty the backpack sessions?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's something. It's with the new team. It's introduced on the first boot camp without PCs. Then I make them understand the dynamics, and as I said before, understand the group dynamics and what's in play and what can disturb. And then I give them tools, and I normally use the metaphor. We call it empty the backpack, and that's a metaphor. It's easier to, how should we take an empty the backpack when we use that metaphor instead of, okay, we need a talk how we are with each other, what's in play in the team. So it's a little bit less dangerous. So, but the way it's done is that we're sitting away from the computers, we're sitting in a circle, and then either it could be, but the question is normally, okay, anything in play, anything that has something to do. Now it's this, the setting is set. The room, as I said, the room is defined. Now we are not talking about technique, tactique, or result. We're talking about what is going on in the team. And then, I mean, people start talking. In the beginning, they are very much in the beginning of when they are learning this new thing, this new tool. They are very much about the result and we should do this and on the game. And then it's my task to drag them. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the relations in the team. How are we doing with each other? What are the dynamics? How are the relations in the team? And it also comes with, again, that's a team culture that people understand, and that's also a process, that it is so important to be honest. It's so important to have the courage to say what's on my mind, also be vulnerable, and that is also a process. But and as I mean, when we're working with a high performance team, this being honest, being honest, daring to be vulnerable, have the courage to be vulnerable, speak about the feelings, how I am right now, what's occupying me is so important to create the connection, the right connections in the team, and the cohesion in the team.
I think it's so powerful. You mentioned
it's extremely powerful. I must say that now astrologers at that time, they were extremely good at it. I mean, in the beginning, they didn't know anything about it, but they just, I mean, they just grew with it, and also with Vitality. I have no doubt that Falcons will be the same, but it just takes a little time. But then again, whenever it's meaningful to people, then people buy into it. So our job as coaches is to create that meaning in what we're doing.
And again, why it's so important to allow people to really connect with the emotional side of all the things as well.
Exactly.
And you said as well, players can call these too?
Oh yeah. It's players can call them, and we need an empty the backpack, and then we know there's something that and the thing is that when we're talking about group dynamics, and we were talking about this, there's something that we're conscious about, and there's something that we are less conscious, and something we're completely unconscious about when we're talking about what's going on in the teams. And the things that I use the phrase over and under the table. That's over the table. That's where we got the roles, where we got the task, where we got the conflicts. That's where we got the things that we're aware of. Just under the table, that's where we got the difficult feelings, as I said before, that are present in any team or any relation. But we are not really, depending on the culture, we're not really. It's unpleasant to talk about. As I said, I'm jealousy and envy and all that. That's also in place. But we are not really. We're not comfortable with talking about it. And if we don't talk about it, but we still have this, there's something going on, then it's related to a feeling. I can have a feeling, John, that I overstepped your boundary yesterday. I can have that feeling that my coach or my teammates are not trusting me. And that's a feeling, and the feeling is coming from somewhere. And that's a completely different story about. Yeah, I mean, when you're connected to when you have a feeling something is going on, it is connected to experiences over time that you have gathered. But that's a different story. But this having that feeling if we don't bring that feeling into play, then it can becomes into a fantasy, and a fantasy that, okay, as I said, okay, my coach doesn't really trust me, my teammates don't really trust me, or John is mad at me, or whatever. And if we are not dealing with that fantasy, then it can remove the focus from the here and now, from the individual or from the team as a whole. And the only way to deal with that, or to deal with the fantasy, is to bring it above the table, and get it either confirmed, or, yeah, that's right, you made me mad yesterday. Yeah, I don't trust you. Okay, then we can deal with the problem. Or it could be the other way. No way, you didn't make me mad. Or, no, I trust you completely. Where does that come from, eh? Then the fantasy is deflated. And then we're back, then we're focused. So it's about all this noise, getting rid of that. And that's why we have this empty the backpack. So as I said, a player can call that, an athlete can call that empty the backpack, a coach can call, I can call that empty the backpack. And sometimes we just have the empty backpack whenever we start a competition. It was just an empty backpack, just to look, is there something in the backpack that we need to address before we go into combat? Because there's everybody who has walked with a backpack knows that the further you walk, the longer you walk with the backpack, the heavier it feels. No matter the weight, but the heavier it feels. So sometimes you have to just step up, take off the backpack, and then just look at it, or take a sip of water, and then you continue, and then it feels lighter, right? And you also get a total different view of the world when you do that. So that's a metaphor that we use. I don't know if it makes sense to you, but
yeah, absolutely. I love it, and I love the idea of having these metaphors so everyone has a thing to call. You know, if you didn't have this, but you wanted to encourage it, it's so much harder for a player to say, I'd like to have a kind of honest conversation, please, rather than like this one specific practice and tool that we do regularly, but anyone can call it. I think it's so powerful.
And I think one of the things that I have learned over time coaching is that if you create what I call the space for something, then things happen, eh? The space, now we're talking about this, then we're talking about this, now we have a space for empty the backpack, then something happens. Instead of saying, okay, we just come, let's talk about things when they arises, or when it's necessary, or whatever, then it never happens. That's more difficult. Set the one thing that was, now we got a new assistant coach on the CS team in Falcons, and Danny and Max, and after Malta, I created the space. Say, okay, now we spend 1 hour talking about your cooperation based on the experience, and based on what we just is it something that we should stop doing? Is it something that should continue doing? Is something new we should stop doing? But creating that space, it was marvelous, and what they gained from that. But if we haven't created that space, it was never done. That's my I think that would be the outcome of it.
Mm.
So creating space for these talks.
Mm.
That's powerful.
I think it's a great way to think about it, and I'm kind of reassessing what decisions that I've made in the past, because I'm a massive proponent of that in League of Legends, which is the game that I've coached. I'm a massive proponent of doing that when it comes to the tactical side of things, where as a coach, it's even more different, you know, different esports, but we don't get to be standing behind them when they play. So it's really important for me, whenever we're talking about the tactical side of the game, to just create a frame and let them discuss in it. So we show a clip and have the right primer for how we should look at it, but then let them talk about it. But looking back on my own career, it wasn't something that I did in terms of the culture. But when you're saying it now, it just seems so clearly better, and it's more like, okay, I'm the one who has to say, let's have one of these conversations, which can be okay and better than not doing it, but I'm going to miss stuff. I'm going to not know that this person thought this about what was said yesterday.
Right. But sometimes what I think, especially when we're talking about this, when there's no agenda, really, we're going to discuss that problem or that problem or that problem. then first of all, people could think, okay, my players think it's a waste of time, or okay, what can possibly come up? Can we handle that? Is there something that will just blow up the whole thing? And that can hinder people or coaches from doing that. But I mean, you don't have to be a psychologist in order to go or start out doing the empty the back. But no way. I mean, we can do it, and it's also about if we're not used to it, then it could be a little bit awkward in the beginning. And awkward, by awkward, I mean there could be a silence. Okay, then just let the silence be. And then at a certain point, people will start talking. But it's so uncomfortable, especially because now I'm coach, I introduce this. Okay, and people not saying anything. Okay, then it doesn't add any value. Yeah, just stay in that silence, and then it will come by itself. Absolutely.
I think it's great. One of the other things that you mentioned before, the hot wash up straight after the tournament. What is that as a tool?
A hot wash up is a little like the capture. I mean, those two terms are connected. If I can start with the capture, because after every game we have, the first thing we do is we have a capture. That's part of the procedure. Whenever the interview are done, before we leaving the venue or go back to the prep room, we go to a place just outside the booth where we do the capture. And the purpose of the capture is to catch the first impressions from each individual. And it goes in a circle. And it's just what's on your mind at the moment, because catching those immediate reflections, I mean, is valuable data, or can be valuable data in the work ahead, or the work of improvement. Because as soon as the boys or the team goes into the bus, gets back to the practice room, then the analyzing starts. Then the immediate impressions get polluted by other inputs. So there is a risk of valuable data getting missed or is missing out. And this capture is not a place where we discuss. It's not where we analyze. It's just to hear what's on your mind at the moment. And then we bring that back and take that up in the debriefing that we have later on that day or the next day, where we look at the game or whatever we're doing. And then the hot wash up is at the end of a tournament. Then we just have a reflection on, okay, we went into this competition with this ambition. It could be okay, we wanna see if we can implement the progress that we had in the prac into a competitive environment. That is our ambition of this tournament. Okay? Or it could be to win this tournament. It could also be another one. And then we are evaluating on, okay, we went in with this, with the outcome or the effect was that we achieved that. Did we achieve what was our intended effect? So that's a hot wash up. And then, of course, we have the debriefing, where we take lessons learned, lessons identified. What did we get from this? What is that we're working with? What should we implement, and all that? So there are different stages in that process. But the hot wash up is, I think it's a military term from my prior career. Whenever we came back from a mission, we had a hot wash up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask, because it's really interesting in a lot of sport theory, although I'm sure there's so much difference. People talk about, making sure that the review is colder, like separated from emotions. I think it's something they do in football. But I was recently reading the culture code and talking about this thing from the military of AARs, from Navy SEALs, after action review, where the whole point is the second you're done. So that's what I was going to ask, if it comes from the military as well. But what do you think? I mean, you've touched on it already, but what do you think about the kind of differences of the hot review and the cold review, if that's the right terminology, the right afterwards versus let's let some time so we can actually collect our thoughts.
Yeah. I think there are different opinions, and I also meet those different opinions, because we are not users. The thing is, okay, we shouldn't do an immediate capture or hot wash up because we're still affected of the emotions, and that could something could come out. I'm absolutely not afraid of that, because if we have a culture in the team where we are used to and we see this benefit of bringing emotions and feelings into the play, then it's just, I really think it adds something to the process, and the effect we can get out of our debriefings or hot wash up or captures or whatever we are saying. But I think that when people have a resistance towards that, that's normally because it gets unpleasant. It's unpleasant to say what's really on my mind, and afraid of creating a conflict. But if you have built a system saying, okay, now it's about getting the things, and then we have a system where we evaluate, where we debrief things, because there's a difference between the hot wash up, the capture, the hot wash up, and then a debrief. A debrief is done when things have come down, we have got the input, and then we have something to items or a structure to work with. So I'm very much in favor of both.
Yeah.
And I think when people have a resistance about the first one, then it's about because they're afraid of conflicts or possible conflicts, potential conflicts.
Definitely. I think that's whenever I've avoided it in the past, that is actually why. It's because, I'm worried about something I saw and I don't want it to spiral into something else. But I love as well the consciousness with which you're saying, okay, the hot wash up or the capture more specifically, it's not discussion, it's let's get it all out. And then, it's because people will, if you give them time, they will censor themselves and they'll say, actually, I'll trick myself that I wasn't that annoyed about your behavior. And so by the time it comes to the review, I won't say it. But actually, next time, it's twice as bad because I was annoyed. I'm adding them together.
Yeah. But again, I mean, even though if something that could be a little harsh coming out of the capture, it's nothing comes from nothing. So whatever comes up has an origin somewhere, and it could be important, or it could be less important or more important, but it comes from something, and I'm very much about finding all the things that can be brought in play in order to increase performance on the longer run. So that's why I'm talking about valuable data. They could be valuable, and sometimes it's nothing. I was just carried away. But yeah. But also now when we're talking about the capture, and I know what you're aiming at, but then sometimes we talk about, it's difficult. It has a tough focus, or a tough what do you call it, atmosphere. No, it's not. There's also a lot of good things. Not only when the team is succeeding or have won a game, there can be a lot of I feel energized, or it was good. I really felt confident, and the communication you came up with was just on spot. There's also a lot of things coming up.
It reminds me, actually, now you're talking about it, of the labeling thing from Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator who's written about it, and they've in their program for learning to be, or teaching people to be negotiators, one of their tools is labeling, which is basically calling out emotions that you see. And what they find over and over again is that if you call out a positive emotion, it gets kind of emphasized, but if you call out a negative emotion, it gets reduced. It's like both of the things you want. So that same thing of coming afterwards when you've got the emotions, and we're just going to call them out, we're just going to bring them forward, and then we'll take some time, and if things need to change, that comes in the cold review. I think it's It's great.
And sometimes in a team, it's just part of the team. It's natural. So it is there. It's not dangerous. It's not. So I completely agree. Completely agree.
Great. I'm just noticing the time. I think we could go on forever, but I would like to also touch on the other tracks. So there's tactical as well as one of the things that are there. How much is that something that you want to have input on? How much is it that you let entirely with the in-game coach, or is it a combination?
I think that the technical track that is, and the result track, that's a coach, that's in-game, that's a team. I mean that's so it's more or less. I think with the result track, I also have a say there, because it is about prioritizing, and also the mental health and the long what we call longevity of the team. So I remember when I came to Astralis in 2018, and we started doing this. I mean, they put all the competitions in for the next 6 months, and then it was just okay. We start from one end to and then we'll go forward. And with my background from the military, I know that we're talking about if you want to make a breakthrough, you got to concentrate your efforts and your forces where you want to make a breakthrough. And if you spread all your effort, all your forces, all your what do you call them, all your capabilities out, then you won't break through. So and everything can't be equally important, because if everything is important, equally important, nothing is important. So we had to make prioritizations. Say, what is it? Where is it that we want to make a breakthrough? Well, it could be the major, it could be Cologne or whatever it was. That's where but of course, in the result track, we don't decide ourselves, because there's also other teams that want to win the major or the Cologne or whatever they say. So we don't decide ourselves. But what we did is that in the result track, when I also have a say, not deciding what competitions we want to make the breakthrough, but that we try to prioritize. Because we always go out to win. If we participate in competition, we'll always go out to win. That's it. We're there to win. But I mean, they're different. I mean, they're important in different levels. And those who are not defined as that's where we're going to make a breakthrough, that's where we go out to win. But that's where we go out to test things, to see if what we have trained with, works in a competitive environment, and then make adjustments towards the tournaments where we want to make the breakthrough. That's how we see it. But there's also, from my perspective, another issue in this is that we got to take care of the players. I mean, we got to avoid burnout or stress or whatever if we can, because there is so many competitions. And the organization, of course, wants us to participate in as many as possible. But we have a say if we want to make the players perform on the long term. We also have to take care of the players and the team. So that's also why I have a say in the result track. But the technical sector, that's the coaches, that's the team, that's the in-game leader.
Is there ever a point where the taking care of players versus the results, like, are they ever in conflict? Something I've actually asked several people, where they talk about, I want to make them the best human possible. And my question is always, is there ever a time where the best human is not necessarily the best CS player or League of Legends player? And if so, what would you do? Is there a moment where it's like, okay, look, this is the major, or this is, for whatever other reason, a tournament that we've prioritized, so we have to value that and increase the load of the performance?
Yeah. There's and that's why we very much about. I think one of the mistakes we did, and we learned a lot from both in Vitality and also, is that we didn't early enough acknowledge that there was a need for people also to have some time off or a break prior to going into the periods with a lot of load. But that's also where the prioritization comes in. They say, okay, this tournament is so important. This tournament is so important. So how do we spend the time? How do we use our time and our efforts and in the period between the prioritized tournaments? Where is it that we're gonna take a little bit of pressure out of the team? Where is it that we want to make them go home and just reorganize a little in order to come back? So it's very much about sequencing. And that's quite normal in traditional sport, where you have this what we call periodization, going up, because you can't be on top 365 days a year. That's impossible. Then you burn out, and you won't improve. And that's exactly the same. But again, that's also the culture. That's something that this new sport has to learn.
Yeah,
and I think we are slowly improving.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's one of the areas that we currently miss the most. We're talking about how quickly esports develop. That's one of those things where kind of both sides of it, something we have in a game like League of Legends, but it's also true in Dota, I assume, where so much of it is on the one big tournament at the end, and people just having incorrect peaks, either because they're too early or actually sometimes they're even too late, and a team that's never been the equivalent, never been to the major, is trying to be peaking when the major is happening, when it's like, we've got to get there first, and then once we're there, next year, then we can start to peak maybe a bit later. But I think it's, I mean, with people like yourself, I'm glad that we're paying more attention to it, but I think it's still an area that we're very behind what we need to be.
Exactly. And I think you're absolutely right, John, because with this sport, where it's growing so fast, developing so fast, and there's a lot of interests coming in, a lot of people that want to have a share of this development. So there are more and more tournaments coming in, And if we as organizations don't have an eye for protecting our athletes, then it will. We have a huge responsibility here. Then it will, definitely end into burnout and stress, and we need to take care of that. And that's what traditional sports have known for years. When I'm talking about the periodization, and that's something we have to learn. The organization, the athletes, and the staff have to learn.
In terms of the results, how do you kind of evaluate results, especially when it's not maybe obvious? The reason I'm asking is because I talked to Simon Cox about this, who's got some similarities in your background. He was performance director on Olympic programs for rowing, and he was saying now he's moved into esports, this is one of the areas that's almost the biggest struggle, because what they would have is, right, this is the time to qualify for the Olympics, this is the time for a medal, and this is where we are. So we get to see the progression, we get to see how far we've still got to go. But in esports, sometimes the game is got some snowball mechanics even. So if you go down early, if you lose the first couple of rounds, suddenly the eco is going to be also then costing you another few rounds. Or even if you're in a tournament, you match up early against someone who's particularly good against you, or even they then go on to win. So how do you try and evaluate how far are we from where we want to be? Or maybe, right, we lost and the result is not good, but we actually showed exactly what we wanted to show. Like, how do you find that?
Exactly. That's why, as I said before, that before we go into a competition, it could be Malta, it could be whatever it is. That was recently for our side. Then we start by defining what is it that we want to achieve in this tournament, and what is it that what's the effect we want to see at the end? What is that we're going to succeed with? And as I said, it is. For us last time, it was, okay, we had a good period with this new team. We had a good period of practice. We were improving rapidly because it has been a turbulent time for our CS team. So now we were slowly improving. So let's see if we can implement that development into, it could be communication, it could be, of course, tactics, into a competitive environment where there's a lot more pressure on the team. from inside and outside. And that's the thing we evaluate on. But that is again based on the overall performance model or the structure, because the dream is out there in the future. It could be in 2025. But then we have this two terms in the performance model. We have plan and the process. As I normally say, I've said so often, trust the plan, trust the process. And the plan is exactly what you're talking about or touching on here, John, is that we break that dream down into short-term goals. I say, okay, where is it that we want to be result-wise in 6 months? That leads us towards the dream. Where is it we're going to be result-wise or performance-wise in 12 months, in 18 months? And then perhaps towards the dream in 24 months. So that could be, okay, we got to be, now I'm just saying something, in 6 months, we gotta be where we are acknowledged as a title contender. That could be that. Right? And that plan, or that's what we call the plan, turns into the process where we go down. Okay, in order to be here in 6 months, what is it that we're going to do on the technical track, the tactical track, the mental track, the physical track, the culture track? That leads us towards this, and then we go from there towards the next step. So there is this development, and the thing is that, of course, the result track differs from the other tracks because you don't decide it yourself. I mean, there are other teams that want to be a title contender or whatever they say, but the things down in the technical, the tactical, mental, we decide ourselves. I mean, what we put in that, we decide ourselves. If we decide to do 1 month where we do nothing but smokes, then we probably will be better in using smokes. Okay? So it's so important that we are very specific about the process goals than are the ones I'm talking about in the different tracks. There's a synergy and a cohesion between those in order to, so that is in order to achieve our midterm goal and in the end our dream. So that is that's absolutely interesting. Having that work or doing that work. But that performs well.
Okay.
So
if we move on again to the next track that we'll hit on, the physical track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As with the mental, like what's the kind of goal afterwards? Because of course, well, actually, I won't say anything else. I'll just ask that. What is the goal afterwards of a good result on this specific track?
Yeah. I think it's and that is related to the term wider performance, because, and that's where the precondition for all this, as I started by saying, is to get the gamers or the athletes to see themselves as athletes and not as gamers. Because if they understand themselves and see themselves, identify themselves as athletes, then they start having a curiosity of, okay, where is it that I can enhance my performance also outside the server? Because as gamers, that's my experience, it's about what's going on the server, right? But I mean, being at this, competing at this level, delivering result at this level as where we are now with the best teams in the world, no matter the game, it just requires much more than being the best on the server, on the technical, tactical. Because, as I said, you are your own. I use that term. You are your own weapon platform, and that means if your aim isn't good, if your condition isn't good, if your focus isn't good, then you could be the best man in the server with your aim or using your smoke, but having the other things. I mean, being aware of the sleep, being aware of the nutrition, that makes you able to make better decisions over longer time. That will give you an advantage. And that's why with this physical track, it covers sleep, it covers it covers nutrition, it covers also the physical training, having not being, I mean, athletes on the highest, but have a decent physical condition, so that you can keep your concentration and you can keep your focus over a longer time, and thereby making better decisions. And that also comes down to the food and the sleep and all the things. And one of the things I have introduced is, in order to get that in play, is just a medical check, like in any other traditional sports. Whenever you start a season, you have a medical check that gives you the baseline. Is there anything about the blood? Is there anything about the cholesterol or whatever it is, the vitamins? Is there something we are lacking? Is there something we should be aware of? Where is that we should? So that the body, as I said, it's your own weapon platform. It's optimal. And that, I think, having that focus gives you the advantage of compared to other teams that perhaps don't have that focus.
Yeah, I think the medical check is something that always it baffles me why more teams don't do it, or more organizations don't almost demand it. I mean, we did one sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and the guy who was running it we had, what was it, 10 players and staff. It was across 2 different teams, and it was something like 80% of people were severely dehydrated. It's something so simple as we'll all drink more water, and suddenly...
Yeah, you're absolutely right, And also, when we did the first one here, of course, people were lacking D vitamins. And that also has, of course, they're sitting inside most of the time, So, and also getting a healthy sleep pattern, and also a healthy sleep quality. I mean, within the conditions given, because esports is traveling, I mean, that's my experience, a lot more than most other traditional sports. But okay, and that's just a fact. That's given. So, but within that context, how can we increase sleep quality, increase quality, and things like that, What about food, When do we eat? When we're going to when we're going to a game, when do we eat in order to have the most energy when we start our match, or our competition, So there's a lot of small things.
So you mentioned sleep and nutrition, and then physical. Is that something where you're getting people to you like go on runs or go to the gym? What is it that you like to do there?
Go to the gym. I'm not. I think it's, when we're talking about the physical training, it's got to make sense, and people come with different backgrounds and different expectations or thoughts on physical training. So it's about when you got to make a change in somewhere, in organization or an individual, you got to meet the individual where the individual is. So I got people on the teams that are used to go to gym. They love to go to gym. Okay, they go to gym. Then there are other people that just, I mean, for them it's about start walking the dog, right? So as long as we start doing something, I'm happy. But also, when we're out, we try to go to gym as a team, because that also gives something. And when we go to the gym as a team, some of them go on the bike, some of them go on the treadmill, some of them play squash or whatever it is. That's absolutely, as long as we just go, and what makes. But it's also about making that curiosity, because when they start moving, they start seeing the benefit of being a little more physical, and then okay, we create the interest of, okay, I'll do more. But it's not about being, okay, put them into a context where they can't see themselves. They can't see the benefit of it. Then they won't do it. So it's about nudging, so to speak, in the right direction.
And once they have that slight change of mindset, where they start to look for the things that could be done better. I mean, especially when so many esports have so much complexity, so many variables, to have not just your coach, but all your players are constantly looking for the next edge is so valuable.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So there is and also of course nutrition, but that's again based on this medical check. What is it that you're lacking? Is your cholesterol level too high? Okay, what can we do? And then again, my way is not about forcing something down to them, because it's about finding or making adjustments in the context that they are in. If you are from Spain, I mean, you eat differently than a Dane does. So if we're gonna make adjustments, then it's making adjustments in the context where the Spaniard is living, So that's why we're having dietitists or nutritionists on related to the team also to do that. But with respect for the individual, and it's very much about nudging.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to approach it, because it's never. I'm recently reading a book from Ben Ryan about sevens teams, and they have a similar to CS where they travel all around the world, and he's looking at some other teams where it's just the coach is really angry that there's cupcakes out on the buffet, and he's like, you have to just teach they have to be on board, otherwise you're always gonna they're gonna find loopholes.
But I also think there's a lot of we used to do that, or that's how it is, or we can't do anything about it. When it comes to sleep, have a good sleep hygiene, as we call it. One of the things that I think is difficult to break in the mind of the players is that, okay, whenever we have a late game, then we need to change our what do you call it, the cycles of the day, our program of the day. Then we got to sleep until 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock, whatever it is, and we got to adjust. And the day after we got an early game, okay, then we're gonna go back. No, it's not about that. I mean, tests has shown that, I mean, you get the best quality by having a firm structure, and then you can deviate slightly. But having a firm structure and consistent structure, consistent, that's a better word, about the thing, when you go to bed, when you wake up, and that gives the quality. So it doesn't give the quality if you change your sleep schedule frequently. But that's something that again the athlete has to discover, and that's sometimes where I get quite firm in. Okay, no matter what, that's what we're going to do, until they see the effect.
And how do you?
And again, talking about sleep quality, I mean, daylight is so important for the quality of your sleep during the night. Getting the right amount of daylight. And that's why we do the team walks outside. I mean, that's just how. That's one of the reasons. That's why we do that. Get outside, get going, get out. Right? That's part of the problem. Not problem, the program.
And if we take just sleep specifically, or I guess anything else that also factors into it, when you're dealing with people who are traveling, especially long distances for tournaments, let's say you've got a tournament in America or you've got a tournament in somewhere in Asia suddenly. Is that something where you are? Do you approach it by gradually changing the sleep schedule? Do you go for, we're going to do a Chinese sleep schedule even though we're in Europe for the next week? Or do you just wait until we're there and we just go with, okay, we make sure we're early enough so that we can get over the jet lag kind of more naturally?
I think that depends on, because we have the jet lag, and that is a factor to take in consideration, because that affects the performance. But that depends on the answer to your question. Is depends on how early in advance do we arrive in the country where we are playing, and how many time zones do we have to cover? We can easily stop changing. I mean, if we are coming close to where the competition starts, then I would normally start by adjusting the time zones or dealing with the jet lag while we are in, it could be in Denmark, by changing the schedule slightly. So I would do that. Otherwise, if we have time enough, I will just go down and then let the adjustment take place down there. So, yeah.
And then in the Falcons documentary, I think I spotted some people doing Wim Hof. Is that something that you like doing with athletes as well?
Yeah, yeah, I do that, and both because I think there are two parts in the Wim Hof method. There's a breathing part, and then there's the exposure to cold, and then there's a third, that's a mindset, but that's a consequence of the two others. And I think the breathing, the techniques is very useful both for your health, but also related to get dealing with tension and anxiety and all that. So get the techniques, but with the cold water, it was in fact something I introduced with Vitality when I spoke about a little earlier. When I spoke about, I mean, we can either let the situation take control of us, or we can take control of the situation. And in order to do that, and say, okay, we can do that. We can handle the stress. We don't let the stress and the pressure handle us. We cope with the stress and the pressure. And by that, I introduced the cold water, because nobody wants to go in cold water. I mean, cold showers in the morning. It's in the morning or in the evening, and standing there for 1 minute, 2 minutes. Nobody likes that. I mean, I haven't met people that likes cold water too much. But this making a deliberate decision, say, okay, I want to do that. It's me who decides, and not the fear of the cold water that decides. I decide. I take charge. I'm in command here, and that's what we did. And I think that was one of the reasons why we coped with the pressure in the way we did, up to and during the major. So it has a mental, and it has also a health side, because going in, I mean, it's just boost your system when you're doing that, and I mean, I believe it adds to the well-being, the physical and the mental well-being, together with the breathing.
And have you found people who have, really got on board with that? Is that something that they can then do, either the breathing or a cold shower, I guess, as well? You can take that with you to the tournament. You can take that with you when you're, I don't know, do it behind the stage. We can do it, kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, with the now Wim Hof, the breathing is a different breed, but we have, with the breathing that we have introduced several techniques in order to get a grip or getting present. We have one thing, I think it was the Navy SEALs that went up, but we used it in the Danish Special Forces also, before going into where you get stressed, or after coming out of a situation where you were stressed, just to get a grip on yourself fast. And I think it's common. It's called box breathing, where you breathe for while you're counting. You breathe in to the nose while you're counting to 4. Then you hold your breath for 4. Then you breathe out 4, and then you hold for 4, and then you continue 2 or 3 times. It really gets the system down. So yeah, I mean, some of the players use it. Some of the players use other techniques to ground. That's what we call grounding techniques.
And it's just about.
But with cold showers, some of them use it and consistently. Some of them use frequently, but I mean, with the Falcons, we introduced it, and they're still doing it. Some of them.
I love that, just introducing a bunch of tools as kind of, here are options, and it even ties into the opening the backpack and stuff. Like, you just give them a bunch of tools, and the ones that work for this person might be different from someone else, but they all have now options.
Exactly. And then I assist them in using those tools or implementing those tools. So yeah. And again, it's what makes sense. There's something we want to achieve. There's an effect we want to achieve, but the way to achieve that effect can be different from person to person. And so that's why I'm not a firm believer in just pressing something down on the group as a whole. No, it's got to be individualized. I like that, because it is individual.
And the last thing I want to touch on before we get to the quickfire questions, we touched already on a lot on the stuff around culture, but something that you mentioned, I can't remember where I saw it actually, talking about leadership and teaching leadership and even the idea of kind of captains. Now in CS, of course, as IGLs, Valorant, same, not something we do as much in League of Legends or in other games. Do you think that captains, beyond the person who's just talking the most in the game, are something that's important? And if so, how do you go about creating one if there aren't any? Or
it is. I mean, it's critical. It's so important. And again, I think that there's something to learn from in this culture about leadership. Because when we're talking about the in-game leader, and also when we're talking about the coach, of course we're talking leadership, and having that joint understanding. We have done that very much with Vitality, and we know also with Falcons, with Marco and Apex. Talking about leadership, what is leadership? And understanding leadership and making people understand that they have, even though you're not the in-game leader or the coach, you have a responsibility. Because, as we talked about, there is no leadership if there's not followership. Without followership, there's no leadership. And followership is something that you earn and take, and also something that you give. So in order for there to be the right leadership in this team, we need, as followers, we need to take responsibility also for this, for our end of the relation. And I think that was a wake-up call when we started doing that with Vitality, and was also one of the major factors that Dan Apex developed into the leader where he is now. That because he really tried, but if the team doesn't understand their role or their responsibility in creating leadership, then it doesn't work. And I think that's a culture thing. There's a lot, and there I take a lot of experience from my background as leader. I was leader in 23 years in the armed forces, and during that transition from the Cold War, that's where I became leader, and to Afghanistan, where I spent six tours. So a lot of things happen in leadership, and also outside the military world, in ordinary normal organization outside the sport, leadership also changed because the context changed. It was much more complex. The complexity rose both in the military, but also because internet and 24/7 and all that. So that did something to the leadership. And I mean, being a leader in esport is a complex context. So there's a lot of things that we can take from that world into esports, and that's development. I mean, we've got to educate our teams and the leader and our players about leadership. But it's extremely, extremely important.
Right? How would you recommend people start exploring that, especially if, because I would say most, even at the top level, most esports organizations don't have access to someone like yourself, who's, a lot of people are under 20 years old, so let alone having 20 years experience as a leader. So if you are in an organization and you think, look, we really need some more leadership, both in the team, or let's just focus on the team, how do you go about trying to instill that when you don't have a huge amount of experience doing it yourself?
I think one of the things that both inside and outside this world is, when we're talking about leadership or any other thing, could be performance, just try to have a shared idea of what is that we're talking about. So here, what is leadership in our team? what is leadership, and what do I expect from a leader, and what do I as leader expect from the team or the organization. Try to align, that's where I will try to align expectations about leadership. And then also, I don't think it should be, but try to understand that there's no leadership without followership. So we all have a responsibility if we want a good leadership, and we all want a good leadership. We all want a good in-game leader, right? But the in-game leader is depending on the team to give leadership in order to provide the right leadership. So instead of just sitting and say, okay, what do I want from an in-game leader? Okay, how can I contribute to having the best in-game leader? Right?
Great. I think it's again, I'm just I have this quite a lot when I'm having conversations with people like yourself. I end up just reevaluating parts that I've missed and just thinking like moments where it's like, oh, that's where I wanted this leadership part. I found someone I thought would be good, but then I didn't spend enough time focusing on the followership part with the other people. You know, it's always just clicking these things away in my head.
But it is interesting, John, because if you look at all the literature that is, or development of the literature in about leadership, 20 years ago, I mean, 80% of the literature you could find about leadership was centered about the leader. It was leader-centered. Now, I mean, there's much more. I think I can't the percentages, but a lot less on the leader, and a lot more on the term followership. Right? It's interesting to see what happened, and that is, if we got it to the bone, it's due to the complexity, because the leader, in or outside sport, the world is too complex for the leader to have the overview and the answers. So he or she is depending on the followers to a much larger extent than before, because of the complexity.
And it ties back into all the other stuff where you've been saying, where you're not enforcing something from the top down. You're right. Giving people tools. It's just the same again. I'm a little conscious of the time. If it was up to me, we'd just go on and on and on forever, but that's not a practical thing. Yeah, so I'd like to end with the quickfire questions, which is the same that I'm asking everybody.
Yeah.
So the first one: who are the coaches or people that you look up to, either now or early on in your career?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first one that comes to my mind, I got several, but the first one that comes to my mind was my instructor when I joined the selection course of the Special Forces. I mean, he was, in fact, the reason why I joined the Special Forces. Not because I didn't join the Special Forces because of the red beret or the big knife or whatever you can think of, or the exciting task. No, it was his personality. It was the first time I met, and he was not alone. It was my first time I met a guy grounded in himself, that he was, and his colleagues. That I never met that before, and that created my curiosity. What is that about? How can that be? Is that the culture in this unit, or what is it, or this branch? So that was extremely. He was a role model for me at that time. But right now with the coaches, as I mentioned before, I'm very fond about, very occupied with the rugby coaches. The big one. I listen to a lot of audiobooks about Rassie Erasmus, the South African coach for the Springboks, but also Steve Hansen from All Blacks. I mean, I don't know the sport, but the way they are working with the culture, pulling the culture, the bigger culture for the country. I mean, in New Zealand, the Maori tradition, or the black-white thing issue in what you call the racial issue in South Africa, bringing that into the team, creating the culture of the team, fighting for something, grounded in something. I think that's interesting, and that's why I'm also curious about that when I'm working with the teams, because we got I remember with Vitality, we talked about that. We had Israelis, we had Danes, we had French. What is it that the Israelis drag from their culture, bring to the team? That was interesting. I mean, what is it? What is the Danes? What are they bringing from their culture into the team? And how can we benefit from that? How can we use that in creating our culture? That was interesting. So, yeah, I think that coaches working with the culture dimension I'm fond of that. That occupies my mind.
Now, unfortunately, there was technical problems on my end at the end of this interview, and as the microphone was still being picked up, it was just heavily distorted. I didn't actually work out what was going wrong. So thankfully, Lars was incredibly patient and generous, and he answered the same quickfire questions just over text, but I'm going to repeat them here now in case we've got any audio listeners. What's the biggest hardship you've experienced as a coach?
I think it's having the faith in yourself, having the faith in yourself when you're meeting resistance. I won't say when the organization starts doubting you, but you know that what you're doing is right. I mean, you're the system, but the organization around you starts to be not lose confidence. That's absolutely not the right word, but impatient. They start to be impatient, because they want to see, and you know that this one takes time. Then standing up against that pressure, because again in Vitality we had 1 year before we won the major. Our results, we were struggling, but we had the system. We knew that it would eventually pay off, but the organization was not being impatient, but there was just, you could feel that perhaps there was a lack of trust, perhaps, or whatever. But having the faith of standing through that's hard every time, because you gotta handle your own frustrations, but you also gotta handle the frustration of the coach and the team that can also feel these things. So it is tough, and sometimes it's you get in doubt. What's my feelings? What are the feelings come from outside, and it can be quite heavy. Okay? So, but now I've learned it's just part of the game. So you got to stand firm, because if you believe in things, you do it. Stand firm.
What's your top highlight as a coach?
I mean, it's definitely winning the major in Paris. In Paris with the French team, with the strong, with the plan. It was just, now again I got goosebumps. I mean, standing there with all the pressure that we have been through, with all the doubt and lifting that trophy in Paris before French crowd, in front of a French crowd, that was amazing. I mean, that was everything, worth everything. I think that's a highlight. That is a highlight.
What are 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and people around you need to buy into?
The first one, and that's definitely honesty. If we're not honest, we won't work. Then it will be. Then it's difficult work. So honesty, being honest, even though it can create a conflict, we need to be honest. If we're not honest, if we don't dare to be honest, then we won't. Then it will be, as I call it, an as if process. As if. We won't get. We need to dare to talk about what's difficult and also, of course, what's good. So honesty, that is. Then the thing, I think people around me are committed. As I said, the first boot camp we had with the Falcons, I'm not here to have fun. I'm here to win. We're put in the world to win. So I with a commitment, and that leads to the third one, and that's hard work. Nothing comes by itself. So we need to put the hard work in it. We need to be committed to what we're doing. And that putting hard work, being committed, comes down to not only the end goal, the end result, the dream or whatever, but also the things that we have decided to work with. If we don't put the hard work, we just waste time. I'm not here to waste time. So that's important for me.
If you from today could give yourself one piece of advice when you first started your coaching journey, what would that be?
Oh yeah, looking back, I wish it was possible. I think the one, it was just find your DNA. Find your DNA. I mean, who are you as a coach? What's important for you as a coach? What's your DNA? And then trust it. Stay with it. Trust it. I mean, there's a lot of people that has an opinion on what you're doing and how you're doing and what you should be doing. No, get down. Whenever you get in doubt, and you will get in doubt on the way. I've been in doubt many times, but then, I mean, get back to your DNA. Who am I as a coach? And finding your DNA is a process you can do by yourself. Of course, you can do it by yourself by having that reflection, but also by asking other people. I mean, if you should describe me as a coach, if you to others, what would you say? What would you tell about me? What tell about me? And then could start defining your DNA. I think it's fundamental.
Once again, massive thank you to Lars. I think this episode was filled with so many useful things. I know even going back through in the edit myself, I've written down another bunch of notes and many things to test, many things to think about. So thanks very much to Lars, and I hope you enjoyed.